Chapter 1, The Beginning of the Spiritual War. In a small village nestled at the foot of a hill, where the morning sun often filtered through ancient trees, there was a secret no one dared mention after nightfall. The villagers led simple lives, but deep within, they harbored an unspoken fear of shadowy figures lurking in the dark, whispers carried by the wind with no apparent source, and strange dreams that haunted their minds. No one spoke of it, yet everyone felt it. A silent war was unfolding, not with swords or spears, but within the realm of the soul. Hannah, a young woman with bright eyes and a sensitive heart, was the first to notice. From a young age, she'd had an unusual gift. She could sense presences others couldn't see. Some nights, she'd wake with a chill running down her spine, despite the windows being shut tight. Once, while passing through the forest near the village, she heard faint laughter echo around her, though no one was near. At first, she dismissed it as her imagination. But everything changed on that fateful night. It was a moonless night, the sky swallowed by an inky blackness. Hannah sat by an oil lamp, reading an old, handwritten book left by her grandmother, a tome filled with notes about light and darkness. As she turned the pages, she came across a line that made her heart race: the war between light and darkness never ends. It rages in every moment, in every soul. Demons do not sleep, but light is always stronger if people know how to seize it. The moment she finished reading, the lamp flickered and went out. A cold gust swept through the room, though the windows remained closed. Hannah felt a weight press against her chest, as if someone stood behind her, watching. She turned, but saw only thick darkness. Then she heard it, a raspy whisper, wordless but dripping with malice. Her heart pounded, yet instead of fleeing in fear, she did something unexpected. She closed her eyes and prayed. "Lord, protect me from this darkness," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. What happened next was miraculous. The whispering stopped. The cold wind ceased. The lamp, somehow, flared back to life with a warm glow. Hannah opened her eyes, her breathing steadying. She didn't fully understand what had occurred, but one truth was clear: she had stepped into a battle far greater than she'd ever imagined. The next morning, Hannah resolved to dig deeper. She reopened her grandmother's book, reading lines about demons, unseen entities that sowed fear and doubt in human hearts. Her grandmother wrote that they held no real power unless people surrendered it through weakness. But she also emphasized one thing: light, a symbol of truth and faith, was the mightiest weapon against darkness. Hannah began to realize that her life, and perhaps the village's, wasn't as peaceful as she'd thought. A spiritual war was raging, and she couldn't stand on the sidelines. Thus began Hannah's journey of discovery. She sought out the old church on the village outskirts, where Father Michael, the elderly priest, often shared Bible stories about God's protection. He told her, "People often forget they're not alone in this fight. Demons may be strong, but they cannot touch those who stand firm in the light." Hannah listened, her heart igniting with hope. She knew this was just the beginning of a war she'd have to face, not only for herself but for those she loved. Unbeknownst to her, deep in the shadows, a force was watching, waiting for the chance to test the faith she had just begun to build. Chapter 2, The Power of Words. After that strange night, Hannah no longer saw life the same way. She began noticing small details in the village. The morning birdsong now carried deeper meaning, a reminder of life amidst darkness. But she also saw signs she'd previously ignored: the anxious look in the baker woman's eyes, the tremor in her brother's voice as he spoke of a strange dream. Something was seeping into the air, and Hannah decided she wouldn't let it silently control everyone. She took her grandmother's book to the church, seeking Father Michael's advice. The old priest, with his silver hair and wise, gentle eyes, greeted her with a warm smile. "You've come just in time, Hannah," he said, as if he'd expected her. She set the book on the table and recounted the previous night, the whispers, the cold wind, and how her prayer had driven it away. Father Michael listened, nodding slowly, then pulled an old, worn Bible from the shelf, its leather cover frayed by time. "You've felt the power of words already," he said, his voice steady and deep. "In the Bible, God created the world with his words. Words aren't just sound, they carry the power to create or destroy. When you prayed, you wielded that power to banish the darkness." Hannah frowned, trying to grasp it. "But I only said a few simple words, Father. How could they be so powerful?" Father Michael opened the Bible to Psalm 91:11-12, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways, they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." He looked at her, his eyes alight. "When you speak prayers with faith, you're not just talking to yourself, you're declaring to the unseen world. Demons tremble before God's word because they know its absolute truth." Hannah sat still, feeling as if a door had opened in her soul. Father Michael showed her other verses like Matthew 18:18, "Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." He explained that human words, rooted in faith, could bind evil forces and unleash good. "But be careful, Hannah," he warned. "Words can also harm if misused. A careless curse can open the door for darkness to enter." Determined to learn, Hannah spent the day at the church, jotting down the verses Father Michael suggested. She memorized Ephesians 6:12, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world." She realized the fight wasn't just about whispers in the night, it was a constant battle between light and darkness, in every thought and word. That night, Hannah returned home with hope and a sense of responsibility. Sitting by the lamp, she flipped through her grandmother's book and found a note: "Words are the sword of the soul. Use them to protect, not to attack." She smiled, feeling a connection to her grandmother, who she believed had faced the same darkness she now confronted. Then an idea struck her. If words were so powerful, she could use them to help the village. She stood, opened the window, and gazed into the night. The wind blew cold, but she wasn't afraid. Taking a deep breath, she declared loudly, "In the name of God, I command all evil spirits to leave this place. This village belongs to the light." The wind stopped. A strange stillness settled over the house. Hannah heard no more whispers. She felt a peace, as if her words had built an invisible wall around the village. But deep down, she knew this was just the start. Demons wouldn't give up easily, and she needed to wield this sword more wisely. The next morning, as dawn broke brightly through her window, Hannah heard her brother Daniel whistling cheerfully outside, a rare sound. Stepping out, she saw the baker woman smile at her from afar, her eyes free of worry. Had her words truly made a difference? Hannah wasn't sure, but she knew she couldn't stop. The spiritual war had begun, and she held a weapon mightier than any blade: the power of words. Chapter 3, A Rare Opportunity. In the days following Hannah's bold declaration, the village seemed to shift subtly. Children's laughter echoed more often on the cobblestone paths, and conversations at the market grew livelier, less tinged with tension. Hannah wasn't sure if it was her prayers doing or mere coincidence, but she felt a new energy spreading. Yet she also knew this calm was temporary. Darkness didn't retreat, it waited, lurking in the shadows. One early morning, as Hannah sat at the kitchen table with her grandmother's book, she heard urgent knocking. It was Daniel, her brother, his face a mix of excitement and unease. "Hannah, you need to get to the church now. Father Michael's calling everyone. He says it's important." Without hesitation, she grabbed her coat and book, racing with Daniel down the winding path to the old church. When they arrived, Hannah was stunned to see dozens gathered in the courtyard, from the baker woman to the burly blacksmith she rarely saw outside his forge. Father Michael stood on the steps, holding a wooden cross, his eyes both stern and hopeful. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice ringing through the crisp air. "Today, I want to tell you about a rare opportunity, a chance for us to stand together against the darkness encircling this village." Hannah listened, her heart racing. Father Michael shared that last night, he'd had a strange dream. A radiant light shone over the village, but only those willing to step into it were shielded. He believed it was a call from God, an invitation for everyone to join a spiritual journey, strengthen their faith, and repel the evil forces subtly manipulating them. "We can't just sit and wait," he said. "This is the moment to act, to pray, to stand as a community." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some skeptical. The blacksmith grumbled, "I don't believe in demons. I just lose sleep from the wind howling through my roof." But the baker woman, her voice trembling, spoke up, "No, I've felt it too. Some nights, I hear knocking at my door, but no one's there. I was terrified until this morning, when it stopped." Hannah glanced at her, recalling her own prayer. Stepping forward, she took a deep breath and said, "I've seen it too, the darkness. But I believe we have the power to fight it, if we do it together." Father Michael nodded at her, then continued, "This is our chance to not only protect ourselves but reclaim peace for the village. I propose we start with a group prayer tonight, here. Whoever wants to join, come. If not, I respect that. But remember, light only comes to those who dare to step forward." Hannah felt a surge within her. This was what she'd hoped for, a chance to turn words into action, to spread the power she'd discovered. She turned to Daniel, "Will you come?" He shrugged, but his eyes sparkled, "If you think it matters, I'll try." She smiled, knowing each small step would make a difference. That evening, the church glowed with oil lamps. About 20 people arrived, not many compared to the village's size, but enough for a start. Father Michael led the prayer, reciting verses Hannah had learned: "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act." Psalm 37:5. Standing among them, Hannah felt power radiate from each spoken word. As they prayed, she heard a strange sound like distant wind growling, but it couldn't pierce their wall of faith. Afterward, Hannah stepped outside, gazing at the starlit sky. She sensed this wasn't just an ordinary night. It was a rare opportunity, not just for her, but for the village to choose the light. Yet she knew the darkness wouldn't stay quiet. It would return, stronger, and she needed to prepare. As she walked home, Daniel beside her, he suddenly said, "You know, I feel lighter after tonight. Like something heavy's gone." Hannah smiled, resting a hand on his shoulder. "That's the power of standing together, Daniel. And I think this is just the beginning." Chapter 4, Declaration and Realization. The first prayer meeting at the church left Hannah with an indescribable shift in her heart. It wasn't just relief, it was a small flame igniting, urging her onward in this spiritual journey. The village remained peaceful for a few days, but she knew it was fleeting. Darkness wouldn't surrender, it was waiting for a crack, a moment of weakness to strike. Hannah resolved not to let that happen. The next morning, she sought Father Michael again. He sat in a church corner, reading the Bible by dim lamplight. Seeing her, he smiled. "I figured you'd come back, Hannah." She placed her grandmother's book on the table. "I want to know how to make my prayers stronger, Father. I feel we've started something big, but I'm afraid I'm not strong enough to keep going." Father Michael nodded, as if expecting this. He stood, lit a small candle, and held it up. "See this candle, Hannah? It's tiny, but one spark can push back the darkness in a whole room. Your words are like that. When you declare with faith, they become light. But to make that flame burn bright, you must learn to hold it steady." He set the candle down and opened the Bible to Romans 10:17. "Faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the Word of God." "You've begun with prayer," he continued, "but now it's time to learn declaration, not just to ask, but to shape the reality around you. When you speak God's truth with absolute faith, those words become real." Hannah felt a new door opening. Father Michael pointed her to Matthew 17:20, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." He emphasized, faith isn't just a feeling, it's action. Speak it, and believe it will happen. Hannah returned home with fresh resolve. By the lamp, she wrote declarations she wanted to see in her life and the village, drawing from the verses Father Michael shared. That night, as cold wind blew through the window again, she stood, faced the darkness, and said firmly, "In the name of God, I declare this village is guarded by His light. All evil must leave, for this place belongs to the Lord." Her voice rang out, strong and unwavering, no longer trembling like the first time. Something miraculous followed. The wind stopped, and warmth filled the room. Hannah smiled, knowing her declaration wasn't just sound, it had built an invisible shield against the dark. But she also understood that faith wasn't easy to maintain. Doubt crept in at times. Am I strong enough? Will the darkness return? To overcome those moments, Hannah learned perseverance in prayer. She recalled Father Michael's words, "Faith is like a muscle, you must train it daily." Each morning, she read the Bible, spoke her declarations, and trusted God was listening. She wrote a favorite verse from Hebrews 11:1 in her notebook, "Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." These words became her anchor. One afternoon, Daniel entered, looking worried. "Hannah, I overheard people at the market saying they had strange dreams again last night. It's not over." She nodded, unsurprised. "You're right. But this time, we won't just pray, we'll declare victory." She pulled him to the church, where Father Michael and the small group still gathered nightly. That night, they stood in a circle, hands joined. Hannah led, her voice like a flame, "We declare this village is God's holy ground. No dark power has authority here. We stand in the light, and the light will prevail." The others echoed her, their voices blending into a mighty sound. As they prayed, Hannah felt a power greater than ever, not just from the words, but from the unity of believing hearts. When the prayer ended, Hannah looked around, seeing hope in everyone's eyes. She knew this journey wasn't easy, but she'd learned to turn words into weapons and faith into strength. Darkness might return, but this time, she and the village were ready to face it. Chapter 5, Sharing Experiences. The prayer meetings at the old church became a vital part of village life. Each evening, as dusk faded, the church bell rang, calling those willing to step into the light. Hannah felt proud, but curious. Were their declarations and prayers truly making a difference? She decided to listen not just to herself, but to those around her. One night, after the group recited Psalm 23, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me," Father Michael invited sharing. "We're walking in faith together," he said, "and I believe each of you has a story. Share it, so we can be encouraged." Hannah sat down, eager to hear. First was Ruth, the baker woman. Her voice quivered, but her eyes shone. "I've never told anyone this," she began, "but weeks ago, I was plagued by awful dreams. I saw a faceless figure in my room, laughing hoarsely. I was too scared to sleep. But after Hannah's first prayer meeting, I tried it. I said aloud, 'In God's name, I command you to leave.' And believe it or not, that night I slept peacefully like never before. No more shadows." She smiled, tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. "I know it's because of prayer." Hannah's heart warmed. She glanced around, seeing nods of understanding. Next was Jacob, the blacksmith who'd once doubted demons. He stood, his voice deep and clear, "I didn't believe the stuff you all know that. But last week, my forge kept failing. The bellows died despite fresh fire, tools fell like someone was messing with me. I was furious, thinking it was bad luck. Then I remembered Hannah's talk about declaring. I stood in the forge and shouted, 'All chaos stops, for God controls this place.' It sounds silly, but since then, everything's normal. I can't explain it, but I'm starting to believe." Jacob's story drew laughter, a mix of awe and joy. Hannah realized the power of prayer wasn't just in the words, but in the faith of those who stepped beyond doubt. She jotted these experiences in her notebook, next to her favorite verses. Then came Daniel, her brother. He stood, a bit shy. "I'm not good at this," he started, "but I used to think Hannah was crazy, talking about light and darkness. A few nights ago, I dreamed I was being pulled into a deep, cold pit. I yelled in the dream, 'God, save me.' Just like Hannah taught. I woke up, heart pounding, but the fear was gone. I haven't had that dream since." He grinned at her. "Guess you were right." These stories spread through the group like a spark igniting a blaze. Hannah felt a deep connection, not just individual protection, but a community's strength in faith. She stood, her voice firm, "What we've heard tonight shows prayer isn't just words, it's living power. When we declare with faith, God moves. And when we stand together, darkness has nowhere to hide." Afterward, Hannah sat with Father Michael to reflect. He nodded, pleased, "See, Hannah. Each story is proof. Ruth found peace, Jacob regained control, Daniel overcame fear. That's how God uses His word to shield us. But the key is they spoke out, they didn't stay silent." He pointed to the Bible. James 4:7 says, "Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." They did just that. Hannah nodded, feeling a new responsibility. Sharing these experiences didn't just encourage the group, it strengthened their faith. But as she left the church, the night wind carried a familiar chill. She paused, peering into the dark. A faint whisper sounded, but she wasn't afraid. Smiling, she whispered back, "You won't win." Chapter 6, Warnings from the Bible. The village's atmosphere grew increasingly distinct. The prayer meetings didn't just bring peace, they sparked a unity Hannah had never seen. But as light spread, she noticed not everyone welcomed it. Some grew distant, even hostile. Suspicious glances and whispers followed her, and Hannah sensed darkness wasn't just in the night wind, it was weaving through human hearts. One afternoon, as Hannah helped Father Michael clean the church after a meeting, he called her over, his face grave. "Hannah, you've done well leading people to the light. But today, I want you to learn something vital: not everyone deserves your help." She frowned, surprised. "Father, what do you mean? Shouldn't we help everyone?" Father Michael sighed, resting a hand on the Bible. "God teaches us to love, but he also warns us to be wise. Some don't want light, and if you try pulling them from darkness when they're not ready, you risk yourself." He opened to Matthew 7:6, "Do not give dogs what is sacred, do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet, and turn and tear you to pieces." His voice was steady. "This means don't waste your spiritual strength on those who scorn it." Hannah sat, pondering. Father Michael continued, turning to 2 Timothy 3:1-5, describing people in the last days: "They will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy." He paused. "These people don't just reject light, they can drag you down with them. You must learn to recognize them, Hannah, to protect yourself and the community." His words sank in. Hannah recalled faces in the village like Elias, the peddler who smirked whenever she invited him to church, or Lila, who mocked the prayer group as superstitious fools. She'd thought patience could change them. Now, she wondered if she was wasting effort. That evening, as the prayer group gathered, Hannah watched closely. Ruth and Jacob were there, eyes bright with faith. Daniel joined, still hesitant. But she noticed a newcomer, Elias, standing in the corner, arms crossed, gaze cold. After reciting Psalm 91, Hannah approached him, smiling. "I'm glad you're here, sir. Want to share anything?" Elias sneered, his tone biting. "I just came to see what all the noise is about. I don't buy your demon or prayer nonsense, girl. Don't waste your breath." Hannah started to reply, but recalled Father Michael's warning. She nodded lightly, turned away, and didn't press further. A strange peace settled in her, as if she'd dodged an unseen danger. Days later, Father Michael's caution proved true. Daniel told Hannah that Elias was spreading rumors, calling the prayer group lunatics stirring trouble. Some villagers, already wavering, began avoiding the church. Hannah felt hurt but refused to falter. She asked Father Michael, "How do I know who's worth helping?" He smiled, pointing to Ecclesiastes 7:5, "It is better to heed the rebuke of a wise person than to listen to the song of fools." Look at their hearts, Hannah. Those willing to listen, even a little, are the ones you can help. Leave the hard-hearted to God. Wisdom isn't refusing love, it's loving rightly. Hannah applied this lesson. She focused on those truly needing light like Ruth, Jacob, and Daniel rather than changing people like Elias. But one night, praying alone, she heard that hoarse laugh from a dark corner. Her heart raced, but she wasn't afraid. Recalling the Bible's warnings, she wisely declared, "I don't fight you with my strength, but with God's power. Leave." The laugh faded, and Hannah knew wisdom had won. From then on, she understood the spiritual war wasn't just about strength, but discernment. She led the prayer group with a sharper heart, ready to love but aware of her limits. Chapter 7, The Personal Spiritual Journey. Days after learning wisdom in relationships, the village found a new rhythm. The prayer group grew, nearly doubling from its initial 20. Laughter returned to the market, and tales of strange dreams dwindled. But Hannah knew the spiritual war never truly ended. It shifted from a collective battle to quiet corners of each soul. To lead the village, she realized she had to start with herself. One early morning, as dawn broke, Hannah sat by the window with her grandmother's book and the Bible open before her. She reread Philippians 4:13, "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." It reminded her she wasn't alone. God guided her every step. But she wondered, how could she hear him more clearly? How could this journey become more than reactions to darkness, but a proactive walk toward light? She sought Father Michael again. He was sweeping the churchyard, the old broom rustling against stone. Seeing her, he paused, smiling. "I bet you've got another question, Hannah." She nodded, sitting on the steps beside him. "I want to know how to get closer to God, Father. I've learned to pray, declare, and be wise. But sometimes I still feel lost, like I need him to guide me more clearly." Father Michael nodded, resting a hand on her shoulder. "That's a sign of a maturing spiritual journey, Hannah. You don't just want to fight, you want to walk with God. To do that, you must listen to him, not just through prayer, but in your heart's stillness." He opened to Psalm 46:10, "Be still, and know that I am God." Spend time alone with him, he said. Read his word, pray, then listen. Answers may not come instantly, but they come when needed. Hannah followed his advice. Starting that day, she began a new routine. Each morning, before the village awoke, she walked to a nearby field with her Bible and notebook. Under an old oak, she sat, reading a short passage, often promises like Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Then she closed her eyes, praying, "Lord, guide me. I want to know you more." Afterward, she sat still, letting the wind, birds, and silence speak to her. At first, she heard nothing special. But after days, a deep peace emerged, as if God whispered through the nature around her. One morning, praying about the village's future, a thought struck: "Teach them to walk with me, as you are." Hannah opened her eyes, startled. Was that God's voice? She wasn't sure, but her heart said yes. She brought this to the prayer group. That night, she stood before them, her voice gentle but firm: "We've fought darkness together, but now it's time for each of us to draw closer to God in our own way. Spend time daily reading the Bible, praying, and listening to him. That's how we hold the light, not just for the village, but for ourselves." She shared her steps: find a quiet place, read God's word, and trust he'd lead. Ruth nodded, saying, "I'll try. Maybe in my backyard, where the morning sun hits." Jacob laughed, "I'll do it in the forge when it's quiet." There's something powerful about praying between anvil and hammer. Daniel shrugged, "I won't promise every day, but I'll start." Hannah smiled, knowing each step was a victory. But Hannah's personal journey didn't stop there. One night, praying under the oak, a strong wind blew, carrying that familiar whisper. She stood, unafraid. "You have no power here," she declared, voice steady. The whisper vanished, never returning. Hannah knew her faith, forged daily, had become an unbreakable fortress. Returning to the village, starlight guided her path, a promise that her journey, and everyone's, continued. She wrote in her notebook, "The next step is to trust, listen, and keep walking with God." With each passing day, Hannah felt she wasn't just protecting the village, she was finding herself in his light.